Hi, and welcome to my channel, Wisdom and Encouragement with Naomi. Thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to be talking about get rid of that stinking pride. But wait, there are two sides to pride, good and bad. Let's talk about it. Well, hello again, and thank you for tuning in to Wisdom and Encouragement with Naomi. And today, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about get rid of that stinking pride. Well, this came to my mind for a couple of reasons. One reason, I was speaking with a friend of mine, and they asked me on Facebook, why do you always have to throw God in everything? Why do you always have to mention God? Well, for one, because I'm a Christian and that's what I do. However, the other reason is because to me, that's so much pride if you don't give God his glory for what you're talking about, especially if he's the one that allowed you to have whatever it is that you're talking about. I believe in giving it back to him. And another reason is because I was reading in the book of Daniel, and the book of Daniel spells it out so clearly for me. So before we go there to Daniel, I'm going to briefly tell you what the biblical definition of pride. It refers to high or exalted attitude. It's the opposite of virtue and humility, and it usually goes over into the area of arrogance and conceit. So that's where you don't want to be with pride. As I mentioned too, there are two sides to pride, good and bad. Now that's the bad side. The good side of pride is, you can have pride and proud of what you've done. I finally accomplished this goal. Yay, I'm proud of myself for that. And that's okay. That's healthy pride. You can have pride and dignity, self-dignity and morals, but not to the point where you're going to brag about it. See, that's where you get over to arrogance and conceit. Some people think pride is only for people who say, oh, I'm wealthy, and they're bragging on their wealth. But then there is spiritual pride where you're not wealthy and you're bragging on the fact that you're not wealthy because it's so righteous. That's so righteous of you not to walk in that type of wealth. Well, so there's good and bad. You have to have a balance when it comes to the thing pride. But pride is normally thought of as totally negative, and for good reason. When I read in the book of Daniel, the 5th chapter, Daniel was talking to Belshazzar. It was King Belshazzar. And it was just amazing to me. I just had to just look further into it. And I'm not going to give you all of the reading or anything, but I have to read this part. Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also, O king, I have done no wrong before you. Now the king was exceedingly glad for him and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatever was found on him, because he believed in his God. He literally would give his glory back to God, even though they praised Daniel a lot. He turned around and gave the glory back to God. But if you look in the 5th chapter, now that was the 6th, but if you look in the 5th chapter, he said to Nebuchadnezzar's son, Belshazzar, O king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar, your father, a kingdom and majesty, glory and honor. Now listen to this. It's going to be kind of long, not really long, but just listen because it's so important. And because of the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whomever he wished to execute, whomever he wishes to execute and put down, he did. But when his heart was lifted up, now here's where the change comes in it. When his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. Now listen to this part. Then he was driven from the sons of men. His heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. They fed him with grass like oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven until he knew and he understood. This is when he came to his senses. He knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men and appoints over it whomever he chooses. See, he came to realization that, hey, God is the one that put me in place, and it wasn't of all of my doing and all of my strength. But then he said this to Belshazzar: but you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, although you knew all of this. Belshazzar knew the fate of his dad, what happened to his dad. He knew all of that, but he still walked in that hardened heart, that pride, which brought him down, just like it brought his daddy down, until he came to a realization that that's pride. Whenever you don't give God back his glory and you try to take it upon yourself, look at what I've done. Look at what I've built. I did all of this all by myself. Nobody helped me. This was me all by myself, and not even giving God his glory, because what? He's a jealous God, and he will not share his glory with anyone. So if there's anything that I've done, and I told my friend that I have done that I thought was really great, or something that happened good for me, I am going to give God his glory, because I know that's where it came from. For every good and perfect gift comes from the Father of lights. I do understand that. So pride should have no place in our life. Now, I'm not saying I'm clear of all pride, because, you know, we all can have a little bit of that in us. It's just for us to stay in touch with that area so that we can clean that up. I also like the quote, I believe that that was John Maxwell said about pride. He said there are two kinds of pride, both good and bad. Good pride represents our dignity and our self-respect. Bad pride is the deadly sin of superiority that reeks of conceit and arrogance. So we want to make sure that we're not walking in pride where we're thinking so highly of ourselves that, we're not thinking sensibly. And that brings me to the scripture of Romans in the 12th chapter, verse 3. It said, for I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, listen, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to. Now, it didn't say don't think highly of yourself. That's okay. But he said more highly. See, it didn't read like this. Take note. It didn't say this, not to think highly of yourself. It didn't say that. It said not to think of himself more highly than he ought to. So we ought to have a certain level of pride, but not to the point where it goes over into conceit and arrogance, and I'm better than everybody, So it's just a healthy pride, but being very careful not to step over into that pride area where God said he hates that haughty eyes. And that's pride. So he hates that. And that's something we don't want to walk into, something that God said he hates. So what is the wisdom in all of this? The wisdom in all of this is to just be balanced in even how you think of yourself, how you think of others. Just have a balance in everything you do. That's the wisdom in walking in pride, because there's a good and there's a bad. So let's get rid of that stinking pride, and let's keep the healthy pride, okay? All right. Well, as I always say, you can be, you can do, and you can have all that God has planned for who? For you.